We had a bunch of dudes enter the portal on day one of the transfer portal winter window. Let's discuss that coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Again, thanks for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Tune in and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. So hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the portal was very busy on Monday and several Sooners entered the portal. Jay, let's start on the offensive line where Joshua Bates, the former 4-star prospect, according to 247 Sports, out of Durango, Colorado, entered the portal, and Garion Hatchett, the veteran offensive lineman that transferred from Washington last offseason to Oklahoma, played one game, out the rest of the season after a biceps injury. Bates started a couple of games for Oklahoma, up and down, like much of the offensive line. So what do you make of these two portal departures?
Yeah, so I kind of had a feeling Bates would, especially, I think Branson Hickman potentially has, one more season left, possibly. So he may end up coming back. I'm actually checking the roster right now. Branson Hickman. Yeah, he actually does have a super senior season left. If he decides to make a return, he may come back. He may not. But Troy Everett has put a lock hold on that position. So it's his. And right behind him at center is Josh Iasosa most likely. So I'm sensing that that's probably where Bates was like, yeah, there's no chance I'm going to be able to win that position back. Garion Hatchett, it made sense that he decided to go back to Washington. He went back home. We were expecting that his little brother, Landon Hatchett, would come here. He ended up thinking he was hurt. He ended up not hitting the portal in the spring last year, and he ended up playing some season here there at Washington. So they probably had some conversation and decided, do you want to come to Oklahoma and try to fight for a position, or would you rather we do it at home? And they're like, let's go back home. So Garion Hatchett is packed up, and he's already showing that he has committed to Washington. So he's gone back home, which it makes sense. You know, the experiment unfortunately failed. He got hurt a little very early in the season with that torn bicep, and we didn't get to enjoy his services. So it made sense. Now the question is it time to start really rebuilding this offensive line, in which we could talk about that on the next episode. But how did you feel about these offensive line, entries?
I mean, the emotional heartstrings for Josh Bates. That's a dude that has been on Locked On Sooners a couple different times before he got to Norman. Just a good kid, man. Just someone who wants to play the right way, wants to play hard, physical football. A guy that, like you said, probably wasn't going to have an avenue to starting. But if you look at his offer sheet, I mean, he had offers from Colorado, Colorado State, USC. I think Arizona State might have been on there as well. So yeah, it's a good offer sheet from coming out of high school. I think he's still got a lot in the tank that he can prove out on the field. It's just not going to happen in Oklahoma. But listen, if anything, he's the one dude that's going to go fight somebody for a dirty hit on one of his players.
He really is.
That's going to be something that shows up on tape for a lot of coaches. And I think he'll have some opportunities out there because I think he can be a good center, even if it's not at the SEC level or even the Power Four. He could go somewhere in the G5 and be a productive center for somebody out there. So just a good dude. I think he's going to have options. He's going to have some opportunities. In the defensive backfield, you saw a Kenai Walker into the portal. You also saw Makari Vickers, former 4-star prospect, top 100 prospect in the 2023 recruiting class. These two, I think, hit a little bit harder than what we saw on the offensive line, obviously.
Yeah, you got a lot of young players in Jay Valai's room there in the secondary, and then on that Zach Alley and Brent Venables defense. You're seeing a very big youth movement. So Eli Bowen really emerged as he's one of your starting corners. There's nothing you can do about that. Eli Bowen is going to take that spot himself. And you kind of had like a rotating door on the other side. So you had Woody Washington, Des Malone, Kenai Walker, Jacoby Johnson kind of rotating. And you start to see as the season was unfolding, you saw a lot more Jacoby Johnson, and more so because Jacoby's a lot faster than Kenai is when it comes to going deep. And as good as Kenai was in the zone setups, you couldn't really have him out there on the island man to man. Maybe a little bit of boundary work, but you kind of you kind of struggled there. You needed a little bit more. He was really good in zone, though. I will tell you that. I noticed his big frame was really good in some situations where you needed him. Honestly, I kind of wish you would have played him against Missouri when they were going deep to those wide receivers. You could have had Kanai following them because they weren't burning anybody. They were just using their size and ability, and it would have been a lot smarter to have a bigger guy like Kanai out there, but I digress. Makari Vickers was one. He was one of my favorites. Seatbelt, when he got here, I was excited about the opportunity of watching him at 6'1", 180. I was like, oh, he's got the size you're looking for in a corner, and he's fast, and he has some great lockup ability. And his commitment was awesome, right? He went through a few hats, and then he stopped, went underneath the table, and pulled out a little box that had a gold hat, and he put the gold hat on and said, Boomer Sooner, which was dope. I remember that from a couple years ago, but the only thing with him was he just wasn't healthy. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, it kind of gets to the point where you start falling down the depth chart, and Oklahoma's looking at some players in the portal right now that you would probably supplant them on top of the dudes that we just brought in as freshmen in Cortland Guillory, right, as well as Malik Hawkins. You got two corners that are, pretty grimy right there, and now you're probably going to add some young corners to go with that and build a really stout room.
Yeah, and don't forget Tristan Haynes, another Carl Albert product.
Tristan. Yeah.
Have an opportunity to be very productive. So it was a good DB class for Oklahoma, especially at cornerback with Guillory and Hawkins and Tristan Haynes. Throw in Jeremiah Newcomb, who was I want to say he was a top 150 prospect in the 2024 cycle, someone that you can be really excited about. And if you're able to get Gentry Williams to come back, you got Eli Bowen coming back. There's something to work with at cornerback. Eric McCarty, a local kid out of McAllister, isn't going to finish with Oklahoma. He's also in the transfer portal. Now, this one is one of those that's just a bummer the way his career got started. Had the ACL injury in the championship game, in the state championship game. I think everybody was really excited about him because of his athleticism and what he could potentially bring to the Sooners, but it's hard to get going when you start off recovering from an injury. So, but he's going to have a chance to do something significant for somebody out there because he's just such a good athlete and good football player.
Oh, yeah. He's one of those guys that you could put almost anywhere. You could play him on offense and on defense. He was that athletic out of McAllister. And I hate that he got hurt before he got here, and it's just been the same ever since. It was one of those situations. He just never got fully healthy to be able to get on the field. And as we started to recruit more in that safety room where they was going to play him, unfortunately, the talent there was just that good. I mean, from Peyton Bowen moving all the way around to all those young guys in there. And we'll talk about really how this secondary is going to look going into next season. We've got a lot of young, really good players that if you aren't able to rehab fast enough and really put in the heavy work, there's a good chance that you'll be left behind. And I think this is one of the situations where that 105 roster limit and the players that are playing now, plus the ones you just brought in, it kind of left them behind. Yeah,
it's just one of those unfortunate natures of the beast that Eric McCarty kind of fell into. But again, a good player that's going to have a chance to make somebody very happy when they get him on their squad in 2025. So what's the secondary going to look like with all of these departures? We're going to discuss that coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.